Hello and welcome to the podcast Shedding Candlelight on cryptids, hauntings, mythology, and more. If it is weird, we are talking about it. This is your host, Lee Donna, and I am so excited about today's topic. Ever since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, I have been fascinated with vampires. When I was around 4 years old, my grandmother spent a few months babysitting me, and I'd follow her around, basically being her shadow and doing whatever chores she was doing. Grandma's little helper. And it was fun for me because I have always been a pretty active person and I like to learn new things. I am genuinely fascinated by almost everything. I even enjoy a good lecture. So my grandmother channeled that energy, and the two of us became peas in a pod. In the middle of her day, though, she would walk us into the living room announcing that it was time to watch our stories. This is when I first discovered soap operas. General Hospital was a particular favorite of ours, which made my mother cringe when she would pick me up and I would tell her about what happened in our stories that day. But one afternoon, instead of our stories, Grandma turned on an old black and white movie that was deliciously terrifying. I was completely mesmerized. To this day, I still remember sitting in that living room, staring wide-eyed at the screen as Dracula crept across the room to a sleeping Mina's bed. It was thrilling, exciting, and scary, all the hallmarks of a good movie. And that stuck with me. We never know what's going to impact us throughout our lives, but my love for all things vampire started on that day, and it has persisted for well over 40 years. Now, in general, I am not a big movie fan. I never have been. I typically fall asleep somewhere between opening credits and the first scene. Unless I am eating, I can stay awake if I'm stuffing my face, but as soon as the food is gone, I'm out. However, if there were more movies like Underworld being made, I'd be a big movie fan. Now, I get the whole superhero craze, but unless there's a vampire in it, I am just not interested. And if forced to participate in watching, my watching is going to look a whole lot like sleeping. I'd also like to take a moment to beg the CW network, Netflix, whoever owns the rights to the originals, please, for the sake of all humanity, bring back the originals. Reboot it with Marcellus in charge, but keep in mind that this world needs Klaus Michelson. Flawed, tragic hybrid that he is, we need him and he needs us. Furthermore, stop killing all the characters just because a show is ending. You ruined the originals, and you also ruined Sons of Anarchy, which is a show without vampires that I actually mostly liked. And Netflix, what in the heck was that stunt you pulled with Midnight Mass? The only way to redeem yourselves is to start season 2 with the scene where Riley is in the boat, and then you let that dumpster fire of a mess that came after be a flash of him seeing what will happen if he lets himself die in the sun on that day. Then you have him swim for shore and his girlfriend offering up her own veins as she tends to his wounds and strengthens him from the comfort of her own home. Then he battles the evil vampire spawn, and the battle reignites season after season. We need this Netflix. Do it for the people. If you have been paying attention or even passively listening, you have picked up on the fact that I know very little about myth and lore. I am a workaholic and I do not spend a lot of time chatting or interacting with other humans, but I am genuinely fascinated with everything, as I said. And when it comes to vampires, you have my attention. So I was pleasantly surprised when I read about the new to me Irish vampire called the Dearg Due. That's my best attempt at an Irish accent. Hopefully, I channeled my bit of Irish blood and got the right twang on that. I have also heard this pronounced as the Dearg Due. If you guys have a favorite pronunciation, use it. I will probably say it 15 different ways during the course of this video, so it's all good. We know what we're talking about. This is a very fantastic Irish female vampire. Now, there are other Irish vampires, like a king, that I am going to be studying soon, but the origin story of the Dearg Due is singular. I haven't read anywhere that she turns people into vampires. All she does is murder them, which is terrible, and her undead heart probably feels really bad about that. But the Dearg Due is, in essence, the only one of her particular kind. Like many other vampires, though, she was born human. Her given human name has been lost to the ravages of time. The Dearg Due is said to hail from a small village near the location of modern day Waterford, which is in the southeast of Ireland in the province of Munster, which sounds like the coolest province ever. The current city of Waterford is situated at the head of Waterford Harbor, and it is the oldest and most populated city in the Republic of Ireland, as well as the ninth most populated city on the whole island of Ireland. It's known for its glassmaking industry that started there in 1783, though the big glass factory is now closed. But the settlement traces back to the days of the Vikings, when in 853, Viking raiders first established a settlement near current day Waterford. In fact, Waterford is a name that comes from the Old Norse language. So long before all the modern niceties that exist in Waterford today, there were farms, estates, and villages. And in one of those villages lived a young woman so lovely that talk of her beauty spread throughout the countryside, drawing suitors from miles away and even different provinces. Many of you have probably heard of Scott Fitzgerald, the writer I have no good things to say about. He stole work from his wife and credited it to himself, and also tortured her mentally, at least. And then he played the whole, oh my God, she's crazy card, when in reality, he was an abusive jerk. And after he died, his wife went on to live a perfectly normal and peaceful life. Anyway, Zelda Fitzgerald, his wife, was a beauty like our dear sweet Dearg Due. Men would come from all over to court Zelda, which drove her father crazy. There was a military base near their home, and the pilots would often break formation just to go out and fly over their house. Then later, after those pilots would take whatever punishment was dished out to them, they would run to Zelda and ask if she'd seen them fly over, tipping their wings or doing whatever it might have been they had done to get her attention. The History Chicks podcast did a really great episode on Zelda Fitzgerald, and you should definitely check that out. But long before the stunning Zelda was on the scene, our young Irish girl was drawing offers of marriage from far and wide, not only because she was so beautiful, but because she was also known for her kindness. She was described as being a gentle and sweet person. And unfortunately, for all the men vying for her attention, she was already in love. The young man who stole her heart was a farmhand, a peasant, but she desperately loved him, and he likewise loved her. The two of them wanted to marry, and they talked about starting their family and how many children they'd have. But this young lady's father was ambitious, and he knew the most valuable thing that he possessed was his daughter. He knew her face could be profitable for him, and that's all he cared about. An unfortunately familiar story. Arranged marriages were common in Ireland during this time, and this poor young lady's father set out to make a match for her that would benefit him. In a nearby town, there was an older man, a chieftain, he's called in some sources, and he was very wealthy. He was also known to be mean and even cruel. But this woman's father, he did not care about any of that. What he cared about was negotiating for a lucrative dowry with this chieftain. If you are not familiar with the term dowry, this is a price that the groom or his family pays to the bride's family in exchange for said bride. This practice still happens in different cultures around the world, some more as a tradition rather than a tool for men to trade women around like livestock. But in other cultures, it's still a negotiation that happens without the consent of the female and without her having a choice in the man she's going to marry. There are religious groups, as we like to call cults, where this practice is happening under the guise of religion. It's sick and gross and almost always results in abuse, which is exactly what happened to our beautiful young Irish girl who is in love and ready to marry her soulmate. Her father announces that no, she's to be married off to this old man that she's never met. She refuses and says, no, I can't marry him. I've already found the man that I'm going to marry. But her father is gaining not only wealth in the deal he brokered, but he's also going to be given land, which will only add to his wealth. So he tells his daughter, tough luck, kid. You cannot marry your soulmate. The guy is a peasant, and therefore he has no way to pay any sort of a dowry. So the father is absolutely not, this guy is off the radar. You are going to marry this older man. Now, in some stories, this young lady's brother is not mentioned, but in other sources, he is. So that is what I'm going to go with because in the sources where he is mentioned, it says that now this young girl then begs her brother to intervene on her behalf. But he tells her the exact same thing that her father did because her father and her brother looked at her pretty face and saw nothing but dollar signs. She wasn't a person for them to care about. She was a way for them to get rich. So they forced her to marry the wealthy older man that she's never met, telling her she had to do it because that's what benefited their family. The old guilt trip tactic. How dare she want to be happy? She needs to make sacrifices for the family. And unfortunately, sacrifice she did. She was dressed up and sent off to wed this man as known for his cruelty as she was known for her kindness. After the wedding, she found out that he was even worse than the rumors had said. The chieftain abused his new young bride, spilling her blood with beatings and everything else you can imagine an evil man would do when there's no one around to stop him. His servants and the townspeople where they lived, they were too scared of him to intervene. He was the rich man in town and therefore held all of the power for some reason. So the people let him do whatever he wanted. He got away with everything while the people turned a blind eye to the girl's wounds, her screams, and her tears. As most evil people do, the man eventually tired of abusing his latest acquisition, so he locked her away, made her a prisoner in his home, and as she was locked up, she thought often of her young love dreamed of her soulmate coming to rescue her. But as the days and weeks passed, she began to realize that no one was coming. Her father and brother didn't care. After they married her off, they never spoke to her again. They took their money and bolted. But this young, battered woman did not want to continue living the way she was, locked away, waiting for the next time her husband would come to abuse her. She made a decision to end her own earthly pain, vowing to one day be reunited with her peasant boy in the afterlife. Now, how exactly she accomplished her feat is one of those things that depends on whose story you're listening to. What everyone seems to agree on is that her end was not a fast one. The anguished girl suffered even more, and she allowed her good heart to be filled with hatred for the men who put her in that position and abused her in this life. Once she died, she was buried without ceremony. In those days, the custom was to pile rocks on the graves so that the dead could not rise again. But the townspeople who buried the young girl, they felt sorry for her and sorrowful for not having intervened. She'd been kind to them. After all, even when suffering, she always treated them with respect. So, as a final show of respect for her, they decided they were not going to pile rocks on her grave. The absence of this sort of a marker is possibly one reason why the location of her grave remains a mystery to this day. I am not even sure her husband even knew where the grave was because before her body was even cold, he took a new young wife to abuse. One man did seem to know the location of her grave, though, because it said that the peasant would visit her every day, mourning, weeping, and vowing vengeance. He did not get a chance to avenge her, though. She handled that herself. In the absence of the rocks on her grave, the young woman was able to claw from her grave on the anniversary of her death, rising to pay a visit to the man who orchestrated her fate from the very start of her life. She went to her father's home, crept into his room while he slept, and pressed her cold, dead lips to his, stilling his life's breath. Then this girl goes likewise to her brother, stilling his life's breath the same way she took her father's. The two men sentenced her to misery, and she sentenced them to eternal death. Her vengeful heart was not satisfied, though. She still had one more soul to take. The young woman next visited her husband, but instead of finding him asleep, she found him in the process of abusing his new wife. The young girl leapt into action, stilling his life's breath and also sinking her teeth into his neck, draining every drop of blood from his body. For her blood that he had spilled and for the blood of those who came before and after her, she drank him dry. But his blood did not satisfy her. It only made her thirsty for more vengeance. The townspeople began calling her the Dearg Due, the red bloodsucker. Every year on the anniversary of her death, she rises from her grave as beautiful as ever. But the sweet and gentle girl is no more. In her place is vengeance and rage. And for this one night each year, she lures young men away with her beauty, taking them to a quiet spot with promises of love and romance. And then she sinks her fangs into their neck, unable to stop herself from draining every drop of their blood. It is said that if you want to stop the Dearg Due, you must find her grave and cover it with stones while she sleeps, making it impossible for her to rise again. As best as anyone knows, her grave is near Reginald's Tower in modern-day Waterford City, where she's buried in the vicinity of Strongbow's Tree, a location where there is no such tree, nor is there a graveyard, not now anyway. As the countryside gave way to the sprawling city, was the Dearg Due's grave covered by cement? Is her resting place under a road or beneath a building? If so, maybe she's trapped in her grave already, never to rise again. Or maybe she was blocked from ever returning to her grave, and now she prowls for victims every night instead of only on the anniversary of her death. Either way, if her spirit is trapped within the evil nature of the vengeful Dearg Due, our once sweet maiden was never reunited with her true love. If his spirit finds its way back to her, maybe the bloody reign of the Dearg Due will finally be over. You see, all vampire stories are love stories. Once you get past the blood and gore, it's all warm and fuzzy. If you have a good vampire story, please let me know. I am always open to books about vampires, fiction or not. I like my stuff fairly clean. The Sookie Stackhouse books were a stretch for me. I skipped most of the sex scenes, and I could not stomach to watch the TV show because it was much worse than the books. But if this is your genre, that comment will give you the gauge of where I'm at in my reading preferences. So if you have something you think I will like, please do let me know. Resources for today's show are in the show notes. I know this was a short one, but after a couple of long ones, I thought we could all use a bit of a shorter one. Like, subscribe, follow, and join me on Patreon at patreon.com/leedawnabooks. I am on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I do not pay a lot of attention to social media, but I do try to post things on a sporadically regular basis. That is the thing. Look it up. You can find me using some form of Leedawna. That is LeeDawna. My email is leedawnabooks@gmail.com. And my website, where you can buy any of my books, including signed paperbacks, is leedawnabooks.com. You guys love my scribbly scratch and how my little hearts sometimes look like messed up circles. It's really great, and I appreciate that you guys understand my struggles. I mean, holding an actual writing utensil these days is hard. I have been trying to sketch more lately, though, so maybe I'll get better. But until then, I do sign with a heart and then my name underneath. So if you get a book and you're like, what happened? Like, what is this? That is a heart and my name just for you. My signatures are also always a little different in every single book, but I've had a scribble signature since I was 18. So you are getting an authentic experience. And I'm not even going to attempt to write legibly because that would not be authentic. And I'd rather keep it real over here with my fake pen name. I do have a whole video about my pen name on my book channel on YouTube, and since it's basically almost identical to my actual name, my signature simply has not changed since I was a child. Anything from my life is going to be signed the same way, meaning with some form of a scribble. I do appreciate you guys, though, and if YouTube is your thing, the podcast channel is Immortal Monsters. Please subscribe to that one, and my book channel is Leedawna Books. I do not post a lot there, as you might well know, but you are welcome to subscribe to that one as well, and I will see you guys sporadically regular. Bye. Take care.
immortal monsters.